Welcome to Intertek's Assurance in Action series. Today's discussion is on healthy buildings, exploring the crucial intersection of design, construction, and environmentally responsible buildings. Today's discussion centers on WELL, and our subject matter expert is Alan Scott, Director of Sustainability for Intertek's Building and Construction Division. Alan, welcome. And for those who don't know who you are, can you give some background and what you're currently doing with Intertek?
Absolutely. Pleasure to be here with you today, Shawn. I am a registered architect and spent the early part of my career in traditional design practice. But for the last 25 years, I've been working as a sustainable building consultant, supporting clients with sustainable, healthy, and resilient building design and construction and operation considerations. So in my current role as Director of Sustainability with Intertek's Building and Construction team, I both advise our internal team and support clients externally on healthy, resilient, and sustainable building projects.
So with that, our topic today is on WELL. And can you give explanation to our audience on what WELL is, WELL Building Standard, and kind of why it exists?
Yeah, so the WELL Building Standard is a international healthy building standard. It's maintained by the International Well Building Institute, and it is a rating system for healthy buildings. It covers comprehensively issues from air quality and water quality and healthy foods in food service in the building, acoustic and thermal comfort, and mental well-being and other aspects within the building. So it is a very deep and broad healthy building rating system with minimum requirements and optional enhancements to make a holistically healthy building.
Now, I'm just curious, is WELL an acronym, or is it actually just the word WELL for well building?
It is just WELL for well building.
Okay. Unlike LEED, which is an acronym. So
exactly.
Along those lines with LEED, talked about LEED in a previous discussion. And what's the difference between the two? How do they interconnect? Does resilience come into the mix with these three? Can you kind of set the stage and explain the differences?
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing to understand. WELL is complementary to LEED and to resilience considerations, but it is very distinct in its focus. If you listen to our previous discussion on LEED, you know that it comprehensively covers a broad range of sustainable building topics, including indoor environmental quality. The WELL Building Standard expands on that indoor environmental quality and gets much deeper and more specific into those requirements. So it doesn't duplicate LEED; it expands on one aspect to it. So many projects that seek LEED certification are also seeking WELL certification. They're not duplicative of each other. And similar to how we've discussed resilience, there are aspects of protecting the health and well-being of building occupants, and WELL is focused on that on an ongoing basis. But some of the strategies you might include in WELL would support or enhance a resilient strategy in a building as well.
On a side note, I'm just curious the timeline. How long has WELL been around? Is this in the last 10 years or so?
Yeah, I lost track of exactly when it was introduced, but it has been approximately 10 years or a little bit more than that since it was first introduced.
From the timeline standpoint, LEED was probably one of the first initiatives that came out, right? And then we had WELL, and then resilience. Is that kind of the order of how things kind of came to the market, if you will?
Yes.
Okay. So can you tell me a little bit about this trend, if we want to still call it a trend, focus on healthy buildings? Because not only has it really established itself over the years, but certainly there's a lot moving forward with it. And can you speak a little bit on that?
Yeah, so the trend to healthy building has been happening for a long time and actually predates LEED. There were some people who were in the industry back in the 80s and 90s will remember things like six building syndrome, where aggressive energy codes that reduce ventilation in buildings resulted in indoor air quality issues. And so then at that time, we had this tug and pull between energy savings and building health. And so that was some of the first things that raised awareness about that. That trend has progressed into much more robust and interesting requirements, understanding the science of our physiology and how we relate to our built environment, and understanding the importance of things like light quality and thermal comfort and air quality in our human performance. And most recently, The Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health has released a series of cognitive performance studies showing that buildings with higher indoor air quality and fewer volatile organic compounds actually promote greater creative thought and decision making and problem solving. So to kind of wrap up this interesting evolution, this trend has been going on for a long time. And although most people would like to forget about the COVID-19 pandemic, that pandemic raised lots of people's awareness about the impacts of the built environment on health considerations and accelerated that movement. So since the pandemic, we've been coming out and understanding that average person, the employees looking for places to work, tenants looking for a building to occupy on, are thinking about the criteria of, is this building healthier than the other one I might consider?
And that's a great point. I can only imagine it's just been heightened to another level since the pandemic, probably in a positive way, having designers and building owners and occupants think of things a little bit differently.
Yeah, and the other piece just to emphasize is that there's a financial component to this, because while in the case of sustainable building for a long time, we've talked about reducing energy use and saving on utilities. But in reality, utilities are a relatively small portion of the total budget of a company or organization, whereas people make up 85% of the total costs, the salaries and benefits. And so increasing the productivity of people in a building, even 1%, actually goes to the bottom line much more so than other cost-saving measures that a company might implement within their operations.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always interesting because everyone looks at the dollar and the financial side of things in almost every aspect. And I think that's a great point bringing that up, because there is that beneficial side to it in moving in this direction and taking these initiatives.
Yeah. So, I mean, if a person, a knowledge worker, is feeling too cold or too hot, or the lighting quality is giving them headaches, that is a drain on their productivity, distraction from their task or problem or task-oriented work or problem solving, and that impacts productivity.
So how is a healthy building defined?
I think overall, when we think about health, it's not just the absence of disease, but it's an environment that supports both physical and mental well-being. And so a healthy building is looking at what are the needs of humans and the range of needs, because not everybody is the same. Different people have different thresholds for temperature sensitivity. Some people are more distracted by noise and need quieter acoustic environments, while there's other people thrive in a vibrant, noisier space. Understanding all the parameters that influence the way that people perform, and understanding that different people need different things, means that a healthy building creates multiple environments for people to work in, and adjustability or variation that's user defined, so that people can find their optimal space to work.
You may have answered this indirectly, but what has given well buildings its popularity and growth?
Yeah, I think it grows out of that trend that we already talked about.
Right.
But I think that the key is that Well has done a good job of throwing in all of the elements that might be important, both the physical and the mental well-being piece, and packaged it in a easy to understand, lengthy, healthy building standard. So they built on that trend and defined it in a way that's useful for building owners and project teams to wrap their head around. It's important to note that there are other healthy building standards. One of them is Fitwell, which was developed through federal government entities and brought out to the public through the Center for Active Design. It is also a narrowly focused on healthy building as opposed to broad like LEED, but it is a little simpler than the Well Building rating system, having fewer components to it, but it still includes elements like water quality for drinking water and air quality and visual comfort. So the market does have competing standards, but Well, as we've talked about before, has captured a lot more of the attention and acceptance in the market.
So along those lines, what type of projects can achieve a Well certification?
Well is applicable very broadly, and one of the important elements, as we discussed in a previous discussion about LEED. LEED has applicability to new construction, and it also has an element for existing buildings. WELL is a little bit of a hybrid of those things. It has some elements that are tied to capital improvements in a project that could be either implemented into the design of a new construction, or it could be improvements to an existing structure. But a lot more of the elements in the WELL building rating system are more operational. So they have to do with policies and practices of an entity in the building. And so that standard then, because it's more operational, could be applied to a single tenant floor in a building, or an entire high-rise office building, or a school or government building or corporate headquarters. So WELL, it can be broadly applied to many types of projects. And they even have a variation that applies to a community. So thinking about a neighborhood being certified as opposed to an individual building.
So how does a project become a WELL certified?
It operates very similar to LEED, in that project would register its intent to seek certification with the International WELL Building Institute, and then begin to integrate requirements in a new construction project. That means developing a WELL checklist and identifying how does this influence elements that design, the lighting system, the ventilation system, the materials going into the building, the acoustic environment. How are those elements going to be designed to support the wellness standards? And then those are integrated into the project as it goes along, along with the development of those policies and practices that I mentioned a moment ago. From there are two ways that the project team ends up working on the certification. One of them is through documentation that the project team develops, like the mechanical engineer might develop some calculations and memo and a narrative describing how the building system meets ventilation and air quality standards, for example. And so there's an element of design team expertise documenting requirements going into the certification. Key element that's a little different than LEED is there's actually a performance verification process, where an assessor representing the International WELL Building Institute comes out to the project and acts as a third party to review to see that all measures are in place, and does testing for lighting quality and air quality and water quality of the drinking water and acoustic properties within the space. So that performance verification and testing is a unique part to WELL that's not present in other rating systems.
So is it a point system of sorts where you have to hit a certain amount of points to achieve it, or how do they rank or rate the building?
Yes, yeah. So in that way, it's very similar to LEED. There are a set of the terminology is different. They call them preconditions and features as opposed to prerequisites and credits. But WELL has preconditions that every project must meet, and then features that are like LEED credits that a project can choose to pursue and are worth points. And so the project needs to meet all the preconditions and earn enough points from features to get to the level of certification that they want.
So I'm curious, it sounds like it's almost like an audit type system, and can the building owner go back, and if they don't meet certain criteria that they thought they were going to meet, can they fix it? Can they make changes to get qualified?
Yes, absolutely. That's one of the things, because it's less intensive on the capital project side, like LEED for new construction is. WELL can be a journey as opposed to a destination. And the project team can, if they fall short on some things the first time, they can make corrections, then seek certification there. One other thing that I hadn't mentioned yet that's important relative to that is that WELL requires recertification every 3 years. So perhaps a building owner gets certified at the lowest level, but they'd actually like to be better. They can, over that course of 3 years, put a plan in place to implement the additional either capital improvements or policies that would earn them additional points in the rating system. So then when they recertify, they bump it up a level.
So Alan, who all is involved with a project to achieve the certification? I have to assume there's multiple different disciplines that are involved in the process.
Yes, I mean, the key ones are the architect or interior designer, the mechanical, electrical engineers, and then maybe some experts like acoustical design consultants who are specialists in that area. But the one thing that's different than lead is that the other specialties might be involved is the human resources department of the entity seeking certification might be involved in terms of human resources policies associated with occupant or employee wellness and health. Things like that might be involved, and the facility manager or the building manager who's managing the building on an ongoing basis. So there's a few other entities that might be involved than you'd have typically in a lead project. But another key piece, and I already alluded to this, a key person involved is the well performance verification or performance testing agent who does the performance verification testing. And they hired by the entity seeking certification, but they're a third party who operates independent of the design team. So they maintain the rigorous standards applied by the IWBI for well certification.
So where does Intertek fall into the mix here as far as some of the services that you guys provide for either architects or building owners?
So there's a few areas where Intertek can plug into well projects. On a design or an improvement project leading up of existing building leading into well certification, we can provide the acoustic consulting and commissioning to improve acoustic environments. We can conduct pre-testing of water quality and air quality to see that the building is up to those standards before it goes through performance verification testing. And there's an optional credit in well focused on moisture control in the building enclosure. And so our building science team can help with that assessment of the building enclosure to prevent moisture issues in the building that would create unhealthy conditions with the building enclosure assessment or consulting and testing. So that's one way that we're involved. Again, maintaining independent stature, we also have several people on our team who are well performance testing agents, gone through the approval process to become well performance testing agents, and they can perform the well performance verification at the end of a project before it achieves certification.
We've covered a lot. This is really great information. And as always, I like to ask, is there anything I didn't ask you that you think would be valuable to our audience?
I think just wrapping up and emphasizing that the new expectation from people is that buildings will be focused on protecting their health. And so there are a lot of different ways to do that. Some basic elements of identifying concerns in the building and addressing those with interventions, all the way to achieving a Fitwell or well certification. And so it's important to think about those aspects. What are your constituents thinking about, and then move forward with that. And that's something Intertek is poised to support people.
Alan, once again, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And we'll talk to you soon.
Great. It was wonderful to speak with you as well, Shawn.